Some secrets don't stay buried. Some footsteps never fade. And sometimes, the past follows a man home long before he realizes it. James survived the forest, the fever, the hunger, the men chasing him through the dark. But today, the danger he fears most isn't out there.
Listen to me for once.
It's the one he's carried inside him since he was a child. In this episode, the truth finally cracks open. The truth about the father he ran from, the footsteps that didn't belong to ghosts, and the fear that has shadowed him for years, now reaching for Diep. If you've been following their journey, prepare yourself, because this episode is where everything changes. And if these moments have touched your heart even a little, please consider subscribing to our small channel. Your support truly means the world to us. The moment those words left James's lips, he followed my mother too. It was as if the small wooden house swallowed all its own air. Diep sat frozen, fingertips pressed against her lips, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. The bamboo grove outside swayed gently, but inside the house, not a single thing dared to move. James didn't look at her. He couldn't. Lee stood nearby, arms crossed, but even he remained unusually still, as if the truth he just heard was heavier than he expected. Diep finally exhaled, her voice thin and trembling. "James, what do you mean your father followed your mother?" James swallowed hard, jaw tightening. "He watched her," he said quietly. "Every time she stepped outside the house, every time she went to visit a neighbor, every time she walked me to school." He closed his eyes like the memory itself burned. Diep leaned forward. "But why?" "There didn't need to be a reason," James murmured. "Control was enough." A cold shiver slid down her spine. Dawn barked once outside, not loudly, but sharply, as if reacting to the tension inside. James continued, voice cracking. "When I was 9, my mother left home for a few weeks. No one told me the truth. They said she needed to visit a relative. But one night, I overheard my father arguing with one of his men." Diep's breath hitched. She could feel the dread already forming, thick and suffocating. "He was furious," James whispered. "He said she dared to disobey, that she forgot her place. He sent someone to bring her back." Diep's eyes glistened. "Did they hurt her?" James shook his head, though pain flickered across his features. "No, but when she came back, she wasn't the same person. She didn't talk much. She didn't smile the way she used to. She moved like someone who was always listening for footsteps behind her." A tear rolled down Diep's cheek. "And I didn't understand," James said. "Not until years later. Not until I realized how far my father was willing to go, just to keep someone under his control." Lee stepped forward. "James, is that why your mother left for good?" James nodded slowly. "When I turned 16, she found the courage to run again. Farther, smarter. She never came back that time. My father gave up searching after 6 months." Lee exchanged a quiet look with Diep, both of them realizing the same chilling thing. Diep whispered, "So when you left home, he started doing the same thing to you?" James's hands clenched around the blanket. "Yes. And when I met you, when we grew close, he assumed you were the reason I was rebelling. You became the target." Diep pressed a hand to her chest. "James, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought distancing myself from him would protect you," he said. "But when the shadow appeared outside our house this morning, I knew he hadn't stopped. Not after all these years. Dip's voice trembled. The person watching us. You'd think it was someone he sent. I don't know, James whispered. But it fits. The timing, the letter, the questions Lee found at the border. My father's obsession with control hasn't faded. And now that we're married, with a baby on the way, he trailed off. Dip wiped her cheeks with her sleeve. So what does he want from us now? What does he want from me? Silence filled the room again. Lee cleared his throat. Dip, James, before we assume the worst, let's piece together everything we know. He crouched at the small wooden table, spreading out the letter, a few notes he had taken earlier, and a map of the area. First, he said, tapping the letter, someone warned you. Second, someone watched the house this morning. Third, someone close to the father has been asking for your information for weeks. Lee sat back. All three point to a controlled, organized effort. Someone who has resources. Someone who knows where to look. Dip closed her eyes. It was all too clear. But, Lee continued, there's something else. Something that doesn't add up. James looked up. What is it? The warning letter, Lee said. If your father sent someone to track you, why would someone else warn Dip? Someone is working against him. Dip blinked. Someone? Against Transon? Lee nodded. It could be a former employee, a driver, a security guard, someone who saw too much. Or, James whispered, someone who knew what he did to my mother. A chill crawled down Dip's spine. This wasn't just about James anymore. This wasn't just about the shadow outside the house. This was something deeper. Something that had roots years before she ever met him. James leaned forward, his voice lower now. There's another reason I didn't want to believe my father was involved. Dip met his eyes, waiting. James exhaled shakily. When I was walking home, limping through the forest, I felt like someone was behind me. Not close, but far enough to stay hidden. Dip's heart dropped. James, why didn't you tell Lee earlier? Because I thought I was imagining it, he said. But after hearing the dog bark this morning, after seeing that letter, I'm not so sure anymore. Lee straightened. Describe it. James closed his eyes, remembering. It felt like footsteps. Slow. Careful. Always stopping when I stopped. Dip's breath caught painfully. And one night, James continued, I found boot prints near the spot where I slept. Not mine. Not the farm family's. Boot prints? Lee repeated. What kind? Expensive ones, James said. Ones my father's men used to wear. Dip's hand flew to her mouth. James, she whispered, voice cracking. Are you saying your father has been following you since the day you disappeared? James didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was the answer. Dip felt tears rising again, but this time they weren't from fear alone. They were from heartbreak. For James. For the boy he used to be. For the man forced to run from his own blood. James finally whispered, My father. He doesn't let go of anything he thinks he owns. He turned slightly, meeting Dip's trembling gaze. And Dip? He believes he owns me. Lee inhaled sharply, the tension in the room tightening like a rope around all three of them. James, Dip whispered, voice barely a breath. What exactly did your father do when you were a child? James hesitated. Then, with his eyes locked on hers, he said the words that would change everything. When I was little, he didn't just follow my mother. He followed me too. James's words hung in the air, like dust caught in a shaft of light, unmoving, impossible to ignore. Diep didn't blink, couldn't blink. The man she loved was sitting right in front of her, but suddenly she could see a boy behind his eyes, small, frightened, and running through shadows much darker than the ones outside their house this morning. James swallowed hard. "When I was 7, he began, I used to sneak out into the garden at night, just to look at the stars. It was the only time the house felt quiet." Diep waited, breath held. "One night, I felt someone behind me, not close, not touching me, but watching." He stared at his hands. I turned around. No one was there. But the next morning, my father told me exactly how long I sat on the stone steps. But I whispered which star I pointed at. Diep's heart tightened painfully. "He didn't scold me that time," James continued. "He just smiled and told me he would always know where I was." Lee's jaw clenched. "That's surveillance, not parenting." James nodded slowly. "That was only the beginning." He took a slow breath. "When I was 9, I tried going to a nearby field to play with kids from the village. My mother encouraged it. She wanted me to have friends, normal childhood moments." Diep softened. She had never heard him speak this much about his mother before. "But the next day," James murmured, "Father told me those children were beneath me and asked how long I planned to waste time with them. He listed every single thing I did that afternoon, even though he wasn't there." Diep's stomach twisted. "What did he do to you, James?" she whispered, voice shaking. James's voice lowered further. "When I was 12, I joined a math club without telling him. My mother helped me sign up. It made me happy. I thought it was harmless." His fingers trembled slightly. "But on the 3rd week, when I left the meeting, one of Father's men was waiting at the gate. He told me Father wanted to see me. That night, Father sat me down and lectured me for 2 hours about loyalty, about disobedience, about how nothing in my life should happen without his approval." Diep covered her mouth, tears blurring her vision. "And when I turned 16, James said quietly, eyes distant, I tried to take a bus to visit a friend in another district. Only one night. Only to talk. But Father found me before midnight. He said, 'No matter where you go, I will always bring you back.'" Diep shook her head slowly, horrified. "That's not protection. That's control." James finally looked at her. "Diep, my father never followed people out of love. He followed them out of ownership." The sunlight filtering through the wooden slats felt colder now. Lee stood straighter. "Everything you're describing, he's repeating it now. You broke away from him. You married someone he didn't approve of. You're starting a life outside his influence. Men like him don't let go of control easily. And now you think he's following me," Diep whispered. James reached for her hand, gently, shakily. "I didn't want that to be true. I prayed it wasn't. But when I heard footsteps behind me on the trail, when I saw boot prints the next morning, and now, after the letter, after the shadow outside our home," his voice cracked, "I can't pretend anymore." Diep wiped her cheeks, but the tears kept coming. "Why us?" she cried softly. "Why can't he leave us alone? What does he want from our little family?" James closed his eyes. "Control. Always control." Lee cleared his throat, stepping closer to the table. "Diep, James, listen carefully. We aren't dealing with a simple stalker. We're dealing with a wealthy, powerful man who has used intimidation for decades, someone who knows how to avoid legal consequences. Diep's hand tightened around James's. "So we have no protection," she whispered. Lee shook his head. "No. You do have protection. Me and the people I trust. But we need to be smart." James straightened slightly. "What do you have in mind?" Lee pointed to the letter. "The warning didn't come from your father. It came from someone trying to help. Someone close enough to know what he was planning." Diep blinked. "You think that person might reach out again?" "I think," Lee said slowly, "that person might already be watching us. The same way Tran's son is watching, but from the opposite side." James frowned. Which means we may have a chance to find out what Tran's son wants," Lee answered. "But only if we stay alert. Only if we prepare." Diep shivered. "Prepare for what?" Lee hesitated. Then he said the words they feared most. "For him to show up himself. Or send someone again." Diep felt her breath hitch. James squeezed her hand. "He won't hurt you. I won't let him." Diep shook her head. "No, you're injured. You can barely stand. If he or his men come here..." "I'm not a child anymore," James said firmly, though his voice trembled. "He doesn't get to control me. Not now. Not ever again." Lee placed a steady hand on James's shoulder. "James, if you want to protect your family, you need to tell me everything. Every detail from your childhood. Everything your father did. Everything you remember about his methods." James stiffened. Diep looked at him anxiously. "James, can you do that?" He looked at her, and in his eyes was that same boy Diep could almost see hiding behind the grown man in front of her. A boy who learned too early what fear felt like. Slowly, painfully, James nodded. Lee sat down across from him, taking out a notebook. "James," he said gently, "start with the first memory you can't forget." James inhaled, closed his eyes, and whispered, "When I was little, I used to think the footsteps behind me were ghosts." He opened his eyes, hollow, distant. But they were never ghosts. Diep's breath trembled. James swallowed. It was always him. Then, voice cracking, he whispered the final line. "My father has been doing this to me since I was very, very young." In this episode, the truth behind James's past finally surfaces. What Diep believed were footsteps from strangers turn out to be echoes from James's childhood. Shadows left by a father whose control ran far deeper than she ever imagined. As James reveals the emotional scars he has carried for years, Diep begins to understand that the danger surrounding their home didn't begin on the border. It began long before, with a man who never stopped watching his family. Officer Lee pieces together warnings, sightings, and patterns that point to one chilling conclusion. Someone close to James's father has been tracking Diep for weeks. With every revelation, Diep and James realize they are no longer dealing with the past. The past has come to find them.